And Christian, you are here, so thank you for coming. Who do we have on Zoom, by the way, so I can refer to you guys?
This is Shane Chrisley.
Shane? Sweet. You guys are probably sick of doing introductions, but I don't know you, and I would love to get to know you, at least a little bit. So if you could tell me just maybe how long you've been in the industry, and where you live and what your intentions are for, like, what your goals are for real estate, that'd be awesome. And Shane, we can just start with you.
Okay. Yeah, I've been in the industry now I got crazy hair day. For 8 years, a little over 8 years now. I primarily just done new home construction for Arrive Homes, Edge Homes. So
sweet.
just trying to learn how to be a traditional agent. We would call it outside agent is what we would call it in the new construction.
Okay. Very cool. Do you know Parker Barton by chance with Arrive?
Yeah.
Good friend of mine.
Yeah, I love messing with Parker and Kate. They're funny.
That's awesome. Sweet. Cool. Well, Shane, welcome. Glad you're here. Who else do we have? We have Jessica, I think.
Yep. Hi.
How's it going?
Good. So I just got my license in February.
Okay.
So and I'm just in Hubble Creek Canyon down in Springville.
Okay. Yeah.
Staying home with my kids mostly. So I'm just kind of getting business slowly going as I'm mostly home with kids. So.
Okay. Good for you. Way to make it work.
Thanks.
This is exciting. Well, Jessica and Shane, I didn't catch where you live.
Where I live? I live in Elk Ridge. So I live a little bit further south.
Further south
from
Jessica.
Springville.
All right. Perfect. Okay. Well, specifically for those that are on Zoom, be sure and let me know if you have questions. I probably won't be able to check the chat very much. So just to interrupt me at any point and I will be sure and get to you. I don't want you to feel like you're missing out on anything. Okay. So we've got Jessica and Shane on Zoom. Christian. Okay. Nice. Awesome. Signed his first buyer agreement. Okay. Congratulations. Way to go. Okay. So you've got some experience with investing first. And just for those on Zoom, I know you guys can't hear them. So Christian got his license in February, just signed his first buyer broker agreement with somebody. And where do you live? Lives in Provo. Okay. Awesome. Sweet. And I have seen you before, but I do not know your name.
That's okay. I'm
Becky.
Becky Boss.
Becky Boss, yes. Oh, I remember you now. We talked once.
2 years, and I live in Lehigh, and negotiating is the one thing I feel very insecure about.
Yeah.
So,
Negotiating can be intimidating. And frankly, that's a big reason why people hire us, is to do the negotiating for them. That's not.
And I've done well, but I don't feel confident in it. So I would love.
Good that you're here. I'm glad that you came. I hope that by the end of this you will feel. Oh, don't worry, I was late. So hope by the end of this you'll feel a little more confident in knowing how to go about it and what to do and all that. Well, I don't know what Hunter said about me. He probably said a lot of lies. Just kidding. I guess he introduced me before I got here. But yeah, I've been an agent for over 5 years, all here with Keller Williams. I run the Livian team here in the brokerage, which is a new team that we just launched in November. It's a mega team that's all across the country, and we're the first team in Utah, so it's been a lot of fun, a lot of work, but it's been great. It really helps in a lot of different ways. So, but negotiating is it's a really fun part of the job when it goes well, but it can also be a very disappointing part of the job when it doesn't go so well. So the goal by the end of this is to help you guys feel that confidence that you can negotiate, that you're good negotiators, to know what to avoid and what to do in order to help negotiate in the best possible way for your clients who you have fiduciary duties. So that's our goal. But I wanted to start out with a story, and I'm thinking of two. Maybe we'll share one of them a little bit later. But I'm going to teach you guys. I'm going to start this one first. This is an example, a real life example of what happened to me, and just shows the power of negotiating and what it can do when you know how to go about it. So a while back, Becky might know because you were in the industry a couple years ago, and Shane would also know because you were in the industry a couple years ago when we had craziness that for every home that was being, you'd had 40 plus offers on them, right? Every home that was being sold not only had that many offers, but they were often sold with no contingencies or almost no contingencies, which means that waiving appraisals and waiving inspection, things like that. So I was representing a buyer that ended up putting in an offer for a home, and this was on a Sunday afternoon. This was a Saturday night that we put in the offer, but on Sunday afternoon I got a call from the listing agent and said, "Hey, my clients would like to go with your offer, but they need you to sign tonight on this counter offer," essentially. And the counter offer was nothing changed except for they wanted their earnest money to become non-refundable immediately, right? Sounds crazy, but that did happen back in the day. And it was a moment where I had to help my clients decide, okay, this is what's at risk. And it was $5,000 of earnest money. Well, they loved the home. I told them, hey, I don't put any pressure on you, but the sellers are saying, if you sign this within the next 2 hours, is what they were giving us, which is a very high pressured situation on a Sunday, committing 100% essentially to this home, that if they cancel at any point after that, they would lose their money. And so I told them, you don't have to respond to this. We can wait till tomorrow and hope that we have another chance. But also, this is what they're saying, and they apparently have multiple offers and whatever. But I let my clients decide. So they decided, called me back a little bit later and said, you know what, we're going to go for it. We feel good about it. Let's do it. So we sent them the counter offer to sign. They signed it. We're now under contract, which was great. Except for the only time in my life that I've received a call from a client at 7:30 a.m. was the next morning. And that was this client. And he guesses what he was saying. Yes, he regretted it. He said he could not sleep all night long. He didn't know what it was, but he just couldn't feel comfortable. In fact, he not only called me, he was crying when he called me at 7:30 a.m. Pretty crazy. So in my mind, as a realistic person, I'm thinking they still have just as many chances to get anybody else under contract that they were close with. They haven't lost anything. So out of the kindness of their hearts, I would hope that they would say, all right, that's okay. We'll let you cancel for free, essentially, and we'll just go with somebody else. Because at that point, like, nothing would be different for them. Unfortunately, between the seller and the agent that they were working with, they said, no, we want to keep your $5,000. We're not letting you out for free. So we had a decision to make. And I'm going to put a plug in for Dean, our amazing broker that somehow has time to answer everybody's questions about everything. Whenever you're in a pickle, you should probably hopefully have good conversations with Dean too outside of this, but he's the first person you should reach out to most of the time because he can help you through this. And so I did reach out to him in this case after I came up with a plan of what I think we should do. So if you think about it, our contract was from that day, closing in 30 days. Their earnest money is non-refundable already, $5,000. The agent was mean and said, no, they're not giving this back. This is their money. But we hadn't officially canceled yet. So what was our leverage at this point? Did my buyers have anything more to lose? They didn't. They already lost the $5,000. But the sellers, what could they have to lose if we don't cancel yet, knowing that we will cancel? They could lose a lot of time and they would lose the sale. So knowing this, what we did was we held that piece of leverage, knowing that the sellers wanted to hurry and sell, that basically saying, we will only cancel when you approve of us getting that money back, right? Does that make sense?
Like, I don't know what you put left due diligence. Did you have more money or this 5,000 was your?
5,000 was the whole thing.
So you could hold it until the 29th
Exactly.
day. Okay,
The way the contract is written, we could cancel the day before settlement deadline in 30 days from now. Exactly.
29 days.
Now, that's not a nice thing to do, right? But I have fiduciary duties to my clients, and it wasn't just the fact that they said no. It was she was very, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but she was very not nice, right? Very aggressive, very mean. And I'm sure once in a while, there aren't a lot of those types of agents, but they do exist. Not in this brokerage, from my experience. But they can be out there, and you may run into them from time to time. So yeah, so that was our leverage, was we knew that they wanted to hurry and sell to somebody else then if we're going to cancel, but they couldn't do that as a seller. You can't just do that unless the buyer officially cancels, which we had not done yet. So I let them know this was our intention, that we were going to cancel. They said no. So talked to my buyers, they were on board with it. And we basically said, okay, well, we are still going to cancel. They're not going through with this, but if you'd like us to receive that, if you'd like to receive that notice of cancellation today, then we need to get an addendum saying that the earnest money is non-refundable, or that it is not non-refundable, so they can get their earnest money back. Well, they said no, you can't do that. That's not fair. Whatever. Well, a couple days go by, still nothing yet. And long story short, about a week and a half later, they finally caved in and said, all right, fine, we'll give you that money back. So we did. So we were able to get that money back for them. Kind of a crazy story, but I tell you that because that is the power of negotiation. Recognizing that, first of all, I have my clients to protect. That's who I'm representing. I'm not representing the seller. Although that wasn't necessarily a nice way to go about it, that was our leverage, and that was in the best interest, in my opinion, of my clients who I represented. And so we were able to do that to get them to get some of that money back. So yes, it was crazy. Hopefully you don't have a situation quite like that, but it could happen. But it's important to know the contract. It's important to know what options you have. And that's why I say it's good to talk to Dean to see, hey, what options do I have here? What options do my clients have here? Because he can help talk you through it. Now, if you know this stuff off, from your own experience, it's even better, but Dean can definitely be a good resource for you. So we're going to talk about some of these things today, if I can get this to work, which suddenly doesn't work. All right. Oh, maybe I'm. Is this a separate screen? Sorry, guys. There we go. Working now? Okay, we're working. All right. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what is negotiation. We're going to talk about the 3 P's of negotiation, some negotiation tips, and then just some recap and ahas. Okay. So negotiating is not something to be avoided or feared. It's an everyday part of life. Whether you know it or not, we're always negotiating. If we want something and someone else does not or doesn't know about it, the way to get them to agree with you is to somehow negotiate, right? Like we do this all the time in small parts of life. So the first thing to remember is that it should not be a scary thing for us because you do have experience with it. Maybe we haven't pinpointed what that experience looks like or exactly what the steps are to follow, but be confident in that you as salespeople especially have negotiated a lot in the past. Okay, now with this, have you guys heard of the Y4C2Ts? Okay, these are Keller Williams's, I don't know what you call it, values, core values that we consider. And it is important to remember all of these things with any type of negotiation. So we want to make sure that it is a win-win. not just for us and our clients, but hopefully for the other side as well, whoever the co-agent is on the other side and their client. We want to do things with integrity. We want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. We want to make sure that customers are always coming first. And I believe firmly that when we do it that way, when you build your business based off of integrity and putting the customer's best interest before your own, ahead of your own, I promise you that's the only way to make a sustainable business. There are people, you can get away with dishonesty, or for example, an example 2 weeks ago, I had a client that came to me and said, hey, we want to sell our house. Talk to them, talk through the different options that they have. And it turns out that selling their house was like the last option that would be good for them. There were several other things that would make more sense for them. And so even though I get no commission from that today, the integrity and the trust that they've built has been substantial, to the point that just a couple of days ago, I got a call from her brother who's thinking of buying. Now that wouldn't have happened had I gone through with doing this thing for them that maybe wasn't the best thing for them, but I'm convinced that they were willing to listen to whatever I had to say. So if I had told them that, hey, yes, it's a great time to sell, let's just go ahead and do it now, I could have gotten that listing, but it wouldn't have been, but at some point down the road, they would have realized that was probably a mistake. And who would have been blamed for that? Me, because I'm the expert, I'm their advocate, I'm helping them through it, representing them. But that's just one example, the most recent one, but that happens time and time again. When you do the right things for people, you will see that more opportunities will come out of that, even if you have to lose one. And I know that when you're struggling financially, which not every new agent is, but oftentimes that is the case, it can be a little harder to do that, because now you've got your own family to feed, and you're trying to, and this potential sale could really make a difference in your life. But again, I would just advise you to do the best that you can, have your client's best interest at heart, and know that you will be taken care of the more that you do that. So customers always come first. Commitment in all things. Communication. Seek first to understand before telling them what you think. And this is one of the things that I want to drive home today with negotiation. Who has the power? The one that talks more or listens more? In any negotiation, the listener. Which means if you're there telling them more information, you are giving them more ammunition. You're giving them the tools to beat you. And I don't mean to say beat you, because we are looking for win-win, but you're giving them tools that will not necessarily benefit your client and who you represent. So the one general rule to always remember is to never give out any information that you don't need to give out. That can be hard sometimes, because when they're asking you for things like, what is your client's timeline? If you haven't already had that discussion with your sellers, what can you tell them? Yeah, you've got to talk to your sellers first. Now that's on our fiduciary side as full disclosure and making sure that we don't tell them things that are in our client's best interest. But also on the negotiating side, if we are telling them exactly, oh, they've got to hurry and move by this date because they have a new construction that they're building and it's going to be done by that date, more often than not, you're going to lose something for the sellers when you give that kind of information. Whenever you see on the MLS, seller is motivated, what do we interpret that as agents? Yeah, they're desperate. That means I can put in an offer for 20,000 lower, and they're more than likely going to accept it, or some sort of negotiating that is more beneficial for my client, for representing a buyer. So as a seller's agent, it's almost never advisable to do things like that, because then you're just giving away money from your sellers. Now, there may be situations where that has to happen, because they absolutely are at a point where they're like, I don't care how much we lose, we just got to get this thing sold today. Those might be a different situation, but again, that goes back to your sellers have to be the ones to tell you that, or you have to have that conversation with them. You have to have that permission in order to do things like that. But from my experience, it's always better not to say things than it is. And I'll have a couple other examples that we'll share with you in a minute. Okay, creativity, ideas before results, teamwork, together everyone achieves more. We have to realize that the agent on the other side is not an enemy. They have the same goal, and that is to close this house, right? And so more often than not, we are working together as a team to help their clients be happy and our clients be happy and everybody's like that's how it should work. And it does work like that most of the time when we all have that mentality. Trust starts with honesty, equity, opportunities for all, and success results through people. That's the Y4C2Ts. So we can apply this to our negotiating. It's great. All right, so what is the path of a negotiation? What options does a seller have when they receive an offer? There's 3 options.
Sorry.
That's okay. You're right. What options does a seller have when they receive an offer? They have 3 options. They can counter, accept, or reject, right? If you're only getting one offer, most often you should never reject it. At least send a counter offer. If you're getting multiple offers, then obviously you're going to have to reject some of those. But yeah, those are their 3 options. And so it's important for your sellers to know they don't have to accept any offer. They could reject them all, and then they don't have to do it. But those are their options. So obviously accepting is great, and we can make that happen. But more often than not, there is negotiation that's involved. I don't have any statistics. I wonder if there's a way that we could find this out. But in my own personal experience, I would say that 90% of the time that a seller receives an offer, there's some sort of negotiation that happens after that. Some sort of either a counter offer or at least an addendum that comes later. It does happen sometimes where they just accept it flat out, and that can happen. Maybe it's going to happen a little more in this market, but more often than not, that there's some negotiating that needs to happen. Okay, so who do you negotiate with? Do we negotiate at all with our clients ever? Commission? Yeah, 100%. You know, there's that. And then, of course, we know the most common one that we think of is when you're representing either a buyer or a seller, you're negotiating with the seller or buyer on the other side through their agent. So yes, that happens a lot. All right, common points of negotiation. So we have price. It's the most common one, right? Usually is the primary factor. The cost of the property is the talking point of most negotiations. But what other things could potentially be negotiated in a contract, in an offer? Okay, the inclusions and exclusions, absolutely. Yeah, the deadlines, possession times. Yeah, if there's a lease back opportunity, a warranty, right? Yes, what's included, what's not included, all of those things are potentially up for negotiation, right? Which ones of those is always the most important? Maybe a trick question. Okay. Yeah, 100%. Depends on the situation. Most often it is the price, and then second could be the time. But you're right, it could be different things to different people. Sometimes you'll run into. I had one person once that really wanted this shed that was on the property that the seller had said that was not going to be included. Turns out that the shed was built by somebody in their family, and it was just, had a lot of meaning to them. They wanted to take that with them. That was important to them, which for most people would be like, it's a $400 shed. Like, that's totally fine. But for them, it had more meaning. So there are different things that matter to different people. The only way to find that out is through what? Yeah, communication. Asking them those questions. When you're representing a seller, one of the parts of my process is to make sure that I ask them specifically. I have a sheet that says, what would you like to include in the transaction and what would you like to exclude? Now, I'll talk about how we go about that on the buy side in a minute. But as a seller, I want them to tell me, and I have the list of the things, in 1.1 of the rep sheet, it lists out a whole bunch of items that are automatically included. And I would recommend you become familiar with that, because I see so often on the MLS that says ceiling fans included, range included, range hood included. Those are already included by default. You don't have to repeat those again. It's not a big deal, but we see that a lot. But as a buyer, it's important to also understand what's automatically included, and as a seller, to make sure that there is no confusion. That's probably going off topic a little bit, but I think it's very important, because I've personally had to pay for my own education in this way. by buying somebody a shed and a fridge once, and it happens, because of a checkbox that I didn't check that I knew I should have, or that I should have communicated better to my clients or whatever. So definitely be careful with those, because you can get into trouble. And if it's something that is really important to one or the other, it can put a big, I don't know, it just make it messy, give them a bad taste in their mouth about the whole experience. Even if you did 1,000 other things amazing, that one little thing wrong, that's what they'll remember. So it can be unfortunate. But yeah, the point of this is to know that there is more than just the price that we can negotiate. There could be terms, there could be other ways to help. And on the buying end, it doesn't always have to be money that they have to come up with more in order to win a negotiation. There could be other things they can do, like maybe a free lease back for a month if that matters to the sellers. That could be amazing. Sellers could be, oh, I live in this place for free for a month while we're transitioning. The buyers, they don't have a mortgage payment that month anyway. It's their first month. So that could be another one that they do that doesn't cost them any more money. But knowing what your options are is important. But it goes back to this. If you're representing a buyer and you have the seller on the other end, what is the first thing that you should do once your client says, hey, I love this house, I'm ready to make an offer? First thing, every time, what should you do? Okay. Close, yes. But in order to know what they're going to offer, what I think should be done first is to call the agent, the listing agent, to figure out what is important to the seller. And as many of those things as we can match, the better, right? The better chance that your buyer has. Again, doesn't matter what market it is. Even if it's a market where that you're the only offer, this house has been on the market for 90 days. If you can match what the seller's wanting, you have a better chance of getting it accepted. Yeah, the only way to do that is to ask. Now, the agent on the other side, the listing agent, may or may not tell you all the information you want to know, because either their clients have not given them the permission, or they just aren't willing to share, which is fine. It's up to them. It's their prerogative. But I would say that it's up to you as an agent to ask those questions and to see what they would tell you. Because I've found that more often than not, they will give you certain information that will help you in the negotiating side. So I'm not trying to get people to say things that they shouldn't say, but I will ask them, what matters to your seller? Is there other specific dates that would be more meaningful for them? I will ask them if they're buying another home, so that I can hopefully try and match up those deadlines a little bit better, or whatever. So those are the things that I would recommend asking to an agent when you're on the buying side representing. Okay, any ahas so far? We're just getting started, but anybody on Zoom? You guys still with us?
Hey, I got one.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I like how you said you just call the seller after your buyer's already interested in buying the house, just to know what to negotiate and just, I guess, let them talk.
Now, you would think that that's a common thing, but I would say that less than 25% of the time does that actually happen. It might even be closer to 10%, but that helps you stand out. Now, think about it too. This is a free thing you can do as a buyer's agent to get you to stand out a little bit, is to make that call. Because the agent on the other side is knowing that, okay, this person really is interested. They're a hustler. They seem to really want this. And that means a lot to a listing agent. When I'm on the listing agent side, that does stand out a little bit. That doesn't mean that if they're offering $10,000 less than another one that they're going to win. But if there's something that's pretty equal, or if my client wants to reach out to them and say, hey, this other offer is offering $10,000 more, would you be willing to match that price? They could do that. That's up to them. And so that eagerness and that willingness to problem solve and to try to accommodate the seller means a lot. So great. It's a great aha. Okay, moving on.
Yeah, this is Shane. I just liked your part about, it's not a war with the competing agent, because in my 8.5 years, I've had two that literally, one was like Satan's brother and the other, I think, was his wife. And those were horrific experiences. Whereas when it's a cooperative thing, it makes it so much better.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're 100% right. And that's the way we want to be, right? We want to be that willingness, because the reality is, you're probably, if you're going to be in this business for a few years, you're going to run into the same people. You totally are. And they're going to remember you, and you're going to remember them. And hopefully that's a good thing. But once in a while, you may have this developing list of, this is what happened. So, and it has happened to me before. It wasn't this lady, but it was actually another lady that, similar to what Shane said, it was just not a good experience. And I was representing a seller, and she was one that offered on the home, represented a buyer that was offering on the home, but we had multiple offers. And I told my sellers, I said, the only experience I have was not a good one with it. I'm not saying you shouldn't go with that offer, but that is something to keep in mind, that it was very hardcore, very like to the T. This is not happening. It wasn't a great experience. So obviously they didn't end up going with that one. They were able to get something else that was a little bit better. And it was not only because of the fact that I remembered who she was, but that did play a part. And so definitely want to be nice to people. And it can be hard because emotions are high, but that's also why people hire us, because buyer has strong emotions, seller has strong emotions. We as the agents are supposed to be the stoic ones that kind of are in the middle, helping the negotiation happen, taking out the emotion from the thing, from the whole situation. Because we are just here to try and problem solve, to work together, figure things out without getting too heated up. So if you notice you're getting heated up, I don't know, do something to take a break, take deep breaths or whatever before you make that call. Get in a good headspace, because you don't want to call them when you're emotionally charged up, because that doesn't, usually the people that do that are the ones that end up losing in the negotiation anyway. So it's not a good advice. All right, let's talk about the 3 P's of negotiation. We have prepare, present, and position. So the first one, preparation is the key to building confidence and ensuring a smooth negotiating process. So let's talk about some of the, we'll dive deeper into these. Present, moving into the negotiation process by presenting the offer, and then position, move both parties closer until you have full agreement. So with prepare, you want to know your goal. And this is a goal from, let's take this position of a buyer. We're representing a buyer. What is their goal? Is it to buy this house, or is it to buy a house? We have to remember that, that has certain requirements. But if this is absolutely the one, then there may be more flexibility on the price for them, because they're willing to make it work. Whereas if their goal is just to buy a house and there's multiple houses that match their needs, maybe they can be a little more sticky on their lower price because they have other options. So knowing what their goal is and helping them see that is important. We have to know our client. I highly recommend doing a consultation, whether it's with a buyer or a seller, every single time, even if it's a family or a friend, because you're going to learn things about them that are very important to them. And I would circle those things whenever they say something like, I need X, or I really want this, circle those things, because that's what really matters to them. And the better you can understand where they're coming from and what they're trying to accomplish, the more likely you are to be able to negotiate in favor, on their behalf, in their favor. So, okay, thinking ahead, set clear expectations for what's going to happen. That's the best thing that you can do is to make sure that they know that there will be bumps along the road. There always are. I don't know that I've ever been in a transaction that everything went perfectly smooth and everything was perfect. Like, maybe it does happen, but not very often. And so I let my clients know this in this consultation before we even start looking for homes, or before we even start getting their house ready to sell, that, hey, there will be problems along the way. Here's my commitment to you, is that I will do everything I can to smoothen those out. We've learned a thing or two along the way in our experience, and so we're trying to smooth things out even before we get to them. But once in a while, things will still come up because people have their agency and they can choose, and sometimes bumps come in the road. So just know that is going to happen, and when it does, we'll be there for you and make sure that we help you along the way. One question I've started to ask lately that I think they appreciate is, when I ask them, if I find out negative information or information that isn't going to make you happy, would you like me to tell you right away, or would you like me to try and figure out a solution first before letting you know? And I've had some clients say both. Some say, well, yeah, if you want to figure out a solution first and then bring that to our attention. But then I've had other clients that just say, no, they want to know right away. But again, knowing your clients is important because you're trying to service them, and their your 5-star review is dependent not on how good you do in general, but how good you do according to what they expected and what they wanted. And so the only way to know that is to ask them what their expectations are and have these deeper conversations with them to make sure that you're doing the things that they would like you to do as much as possible. Okay, so be informed. Of course, we want to obey the laws and then know the documents inside and out. That's the one that I mentioned, that the story at the beginning, because we knew what leverage we had at that point, what they had to lose. My clients, that they at that point had nothing more to lose. The only thing we had in our favor was the deadlines, and so we stuck to it, and it ended up working out. So knowing the documents totally helped, because otherwise we would have just said, oh, that sucks, well, too bad, all right, we'll send you the cancellation, here you go. Give them what they wanted, but my clients got nothing in return, would have gotten nothing in return. Okay. All right, ask the right questions. So provide you with the points of negotiation to negotiate on. Sometimes our clients say, I want this, I want that, I want this, and I want that. But what we also have to do is help them prioritize. You know, sometimes, and knowing what their priorities are can help you with the negotiating, because maybe they did say, I would like to move in by July 1st, but I don't want to spend more than $400,000 on this next house. Maybe one of those is more important than another. And so if you know that, you can go to the seller and say, well, we'd be willing to be a little more flexible on the date, because that price point is something that they just can't budge on. So it's like offering a solution to the other side of what you could do, or things that you're willing to be a little flexible with, while still telling them that you're not willing to be flexible in this area. Or maybe it's the price. Maybe they are flexible on the price, but they absolutely need to move in by July 1st. That's their goal. But you can only know that if you ask the questions to your client and help them prioritize. If we get into and I do this beforehand, like in that consultation, and say, if we get into a situation where we find the right home, it's a great fit for you, everything seems to work out, but the seller's unwilling to do one of these things, what are the things that what are your absolute non-negotiables that you are not willing to accommodate? And just kind of see what they feel. I will say, though, that sometimes those priorities change over time as they're seeing homes and as they fall in love with the absolute perfect home that they never thought they could have. And meaning, oftentimes people will be paying a little bit more than what they said they would absolutely not pay if they find the perfect home, right? So knowing that that might change is a good thing for you as an agent to remember, because you should check in with them every once in a while. Or when they find a home that hits when they find a home and maybe it doesn't match their priorities like they told you that they wanted, it's not a time to say, this isn't, I would just bring it up and say, okay, before in our conversation, you'd mentioned that this was important to you and this was important to you. This home doesn't have those priorities changed? Or are you reminding them that, yeah, okay, you're right, it is a beautiful home, but it doesn't fit my needs. All right, let's keep looking. And I think that's a good job, good part of being an advocate for them, because again, it's an emotional process for them. It can be exciting, and sometimes they will get carried away with the excitement of it all, that they forget what their priorities are. But then sometimes their priorities do change, and they said, yeah, you know what, that is what we felt at the time, but now that we've seen these other homes, I feel like this is important to me, so let's continue with that. So I have a note that for every one of my clients that I'll circle those things, what their priorities are, so that you can make sure that you're keeping with that the best that you can. Okay, so asking the right questions will also allow you to get to know your client and their goal. We talked about that. Provides insight on where you and your client will have leverage. Helps you learn what will make it a win-win negotiation for both parties, and sets clear expectations. So again, this is going back to when you have an offer for somebody, the first thing you should always remember to do is to call the listing agent, find out their priorities the best that you can, and hopefully match as much of, if not all of that you can do. The other thing about that too is that with your clients, and this is what I tell my buyers, at least we're going in as strong as we can without you feeling like you're doing more than what you should. So that if we don't get the home, you're not feeling like, well, we could have done this or we could have done that, because you didn't feel like you wanted to do that anyway. So we kind of go in as strong as you feel comfortable with. All right, you guys know the difference between open and closed questions. Both have a purpose. Both can be good, but most of the time when you ask a yes or no question, it should be followed up with an open-ended question, and it could be as simple as how come, or what makes you say that, or why do you feel that way? You know, that helps you get into the deeper, the imagery of the iceberg, where you kind of have that initial response, but then there's a deeper meaning behind why they feel that way and why it's important to them that we should be looking for. Maybe another way to say that is three questions deep. If you've heard of that term before, it's just something to remind you that you go 3 questions deep to asking people. I teach a class called Spin Selling. We actually have one coming up next Wednesday here, and I think it's at 10. And where we go through the whole spin selling question-based model on how to have natural conversations with your clients, how to have a deeper relationship with them, and how to help them build natural urgency to the point that they're the ones wanting to ask you, or say that, hey, they need you in their corner, as opposed to that. So a lot of those questions we'll talk about that day. So if you guys are interested, that'd be an awesome class to join in. So it's next Wednesday from 10. I think it's 10 to 12. You guys probably have Ignite though too normally, huh? Yeah, 10 to 12. We'll have to do another one that's not on an Ignite day. You have Ignite Monday, Wednesday, Friday? Okay, we'll do it next month, and I'll do it on a Tuesday or Thursday so you guys could participate.
I think
Yeah,
Ignite
it's
for
an
us
awesome
ends
class.
today.
Oh, really? Oh,
I think this is the last one.
this might be the last one. Okay, well, you guys could make it.
Yeah.
It's a really, really cool sales models. That's true. Yeah. Finding ones that you could use a little more. Yeah. Ignite's awesome. Plus, everybody that teaches, you get a little bit of a different perspective too. And so it's a really cool way to do it. All right. Lost my ability to seed. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so this question, as I mentioned, when you're in a position, when you're doing that consultation with your buyers and sellers, this is where you'll find out most of that information on how to negotiate better for them, is in that initial consultation. You want to find out as much information from your buyers as you can, not just why they want to move, but the deeper meanings behind all of that. And again, that's what the Spin Selling course goes over. We'll talk about how to do that. But one of those ways is to just ask them the what if scenarios. What if this happens? What if that happens? And help dig a bigger meaning on why is it important to them, because the majority of the negotiating work actually happens beforehand with the knowledge that you gain from your clients who you're representing. Because a successful negotiation to buyer A may look completely different from a successful negotiation from buyer B. They have different thoughts, they have different intentions, they have different goals. And so knowing what those are for each specific client you're working with is crucial for them to feel like you were a successful negotiator on their behalf. Because there have been times where I've helped negotiate for somebody that they ended up lowering the price, and I was the seller's agent, and they ended up lowering the price, but they were happy to because they had other priorities they were trying to fulfill, and they thought that I did an amazing job for them because of that. When really, I kind of thought, well, we just lost you 10 grand or whatever it might have been, right? But for them, those other priorities mattered more. And so you've got to know that, right? I could have been a stickler and tried to get them that extra 10,000 and have them lost a couple of days on another thing on the settlement deadline. But again, for them, if that's not what their priority was, then I would have done a terrible job of negotiating, right? So it's critical to know these things. And the only way to do it is to ask those questions the best that you can. Okay. All right, so best practices when presenting an offer, we already talked about, call the other agent. First thing you should do, pay attention to nonverbal cues like pauses and voice qualities. Keep quiet once you present an offer. Listen carefully to what is important to the other party. Stay calm and relaxed. Focus on the customer's needs. Give your offer the best chance. Okay, I'm going to talk about as a seller. I'm going to give you another story that happened just last summer that I represented the seller for. And we got it. We had a home hit the market. We had We had a lot of showings in the first 3 days. It was like 12 showings in the first 3 days. So that was good. We did get an offer, but the offer was for $5,000 below the list price. If I remember the numbers correctly, we listed at 375. The offer that we got was for 370. Well, that agent called me. Actually, no, he did not call me. He texted me and said, hey, what, before he wrote his offer, he said, what matters to the seller? And basically what happened was he was asking for information that I did not want to give because I did not feel like it was in the best interest of my client. He was asking, how many other offers do you have? And what do they look like? Well, my client did not give me permission to discuss that. And again, I don't think it's my best interest not to discuss that either. Here's the truth. Here's what actually happened. We had no other offers. We had a lot of attention on the property, like I said, but at that point, in that moment, we had no offers on the table. So when he's asking me, what other offers do you have? First of all, he's assuming we have other offers, which we didn't. So I was like, already we were winning there because you think we do. But I stuck to it. I said, the sellers have not authorized me to give that information. All I can say is what they have, which is that we've had a lot of attention on the property. That's it. He got upset and said, this is the first time in 20 years that someone said they can't do that. That's not true. You can totally tell me. I can't for my fiduciary duties. And also I don't want to, even if I could, even if the seller said, you can tell them whatever you want. I don't think that's in my client's best interest because I'm trying to withhold information from you. And if I start telling you things, again, like we talked about, if I tell him we have no other offers on the table, immediately what's going to happen to the purchase price that they're going to offer? They're going to drop it. If he's a smart agent, he's going to drop it. That's what probably should do. So I didn't want to tell him. Well, it turns out they redid their offer. They sent in another offer. Again, our list price was for 375. Their initial offer was 370. And they ended up sending us a new offer, an updated offer of 385. So that simple not telling them that we have no other offers on the table got us $15,000 more, which I thought was awesome. That totally happened. So on the seller side, don't tell them hardly anything. Like it's kind of a balance because you also don't want to say that you've gotten, you also don't want to scare them away by saying, we have so much attention. Yeah, this is just crazy. This is back to 2020 again. And then have them feel like, yeah, we have no shot. All right, we're not putting in an offer. Like we don't want that to happen. But at the same time, we don't want to say, yeah, we have nothing on the table at all because that loses your client. So in my opinion, it's best to say if and when it's true that you've gotten a lot of attention on the property and the sellers are hoping to make a decision in the next couple of days. Something like that kind of leaves it a little open-ended, but also gets the client on the other, the buyer to hopefully be a little more motivated to send something in that they still have a chance, but they also want to offer something that's a little higher. Any questions about that part of it when you're representing the seller and what you can and cannot say?
Keep quiet once you present an offer.
Yeah.
I don't know how. I always call the agent or send them a text or something to say, I have sent an offer.
Yes.
I'd like to make sure.
Great point.
It's all
Yeah.
floating out there. I always send something just to please make sure that
Yep.
you've received it.
Yep.
Or
I agree.
just something.
Yeah, you want to get confirmation because it doesn't happen very often, but it can happen where they simply did miss it. And you want to make sure that they get it. So getting an email back from them saying, please let me know when you receive this offer. What I do is when I send an offer, I send them in the email. At the bottom of the email, it says, please confirm receipt. But also I send them a text right away and say, hey, I just sent you an offer. Just want to make sure you got it. Yep. But maybe this is different. I've had it both ways where I'm representing the seller and I've had the agent call me 3 times a day like, hey, what's the update? What's the update? That gets annoying. And it shows desperation from them. So to be honest with you, as a listing agent, if we do end up working with them, I feel like they're desperate. We can probably get more out of them. That's how I see it. But on the flip side, if you send in an offer and you haven't heard anything for 3 days and you don't say anything, I also feel like, well, they didn't really care then because they're not even following up. So I think there is a balance. To me, I think it's at least once a day or get an update from the seller and say, hey, just wanted to see where you're at. Yeah. Any idea when they'll have a decision? Right. Yeah. Yeah, so try and keep it balanced. But I would say that's a good, I'm glad you brought that one up because I kind of glanced over that one and didn't really think about it. But yeah, I think it's good to have a little more communication than nothing. Yeah. But at least once a day. And if they say sellers will be making decisions Saturday night, great. No problem. Then by Monday, if I haven't heard anything, totally, I'd reach out to them and just say, hey, I know things change all the time in this industry. Just wanted to check in and see if that's still the plan. Try and be understanding, but also saying, hey, what's up? It's totally fine. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, and on the seller side, especially in this market, like I said, things can change a lot. It's hard to say that there's a specific time that you're going to respond by sometimes because things can change. I have a listing right now that this is happening to as we speak, where we got an offer on Friday that was $30,000 below what the list price was. It was not what my sellers wanted to accept. They were thinking about counter offering. And so initially they wanted to have me say, tell them we'll send them a counter offer by Monday. Well, a lot can happen in 2 days. And it turns out we did get a different offer that they kind of liked more. It still wasn't quite what they wanted, but they wanted a counter offer that one instead. And so had I told that other agent, hey, we're going to send you a counter offer on Monday, like it doesn't feel right because it could change. And then if I had said that, and then maybe something happens with this one, and then we go back to them, they know that we're like the second option. I don't know if this is all making sense, but that's kind of how I feel. Like it's better not to tell them a specific deadline if you can, unless you genuinely do have multiple offers where the sellers, you're meeting with them at this certain time, they absolutely want to make a decision and move forward with something, then that might be a different scenario. But again, it goes back to knowing what the sellers want. What are their priorities? And if their priorities are to get this thing under contract by the weekend, that's their number one. Yep. Yeah. But just remember, if you get an offer that has a response deadline, all that means is you have to, if you want to accept this offer exactly how it is, you have to respond with acceptance by this time. If you want to change anything about it, you can do that at any point after or before that deadline. So it doesn't have to be. Yeah. The deadline makes it dead that way, but if the seller wants to send a counter offer, no, you don't. Because a counter offer is basically saying, we like everything you had in that offer except for what's changed here, including this response deadline. You don't even have to say in there settlement deadline or response deadline to change to X. You don't have to say that. All you have to do is send a counter offer. And once both parties sign a counter offer, even if it's 3 days after the offer expired, then that shows both parties that, hey, yeah, we're back in, we want to move forward. So just saves you a little bit of time. But that's why that acceptance deadline is called the acceptance deadline, because that's when you have to accept it by. But if you want to accept it maybe the next day, you're like, well, actually, we do want to accept that. Then you still need an addendum, which would be a counter offer. And then you would say, buyer and seller agree that the terms in Rep C are to be approved, or whatever. I don't know how you want to word that, but more than likely you'd change something, and that's why they delayed in responding. And so they may change price, or they may change deadlines.
Hey, Jordan.
Yes.
I have a question. So let's see. So you're representing a buyer. How much is too little of an offer? Because I have a buyer that wants to put like 30 grand less, and they want the buyer to, or the seller to do closing costs too. And like, I don't know,
yeah.
Like, what do you think is too much,
It's a great question. Depends, as it always does in this industry. But the number one thing it probably depends on is the time on market, that the home that they're wanting. If that is above the average, which today's average is what, close to 50, which is kind of crazy. But if that home has been on the market for more than a few weeks, I would say, then it's pretty likely that you can send in an offer like that and at least get close to what the sellers are willing to accept, because most often in their mind, they already know we've been on the market for 3 weeks. We haven't dropped the price yet. We're going to have to drop the price. And so you could potentially get them to just go forward with you if you send an offer like that. But if the home is just listed 2 days ago, the chances of any seller in any market accepting an offer for 30 grand less than what they listed it for 2 days after they listed it is pretty unlikely. So it just depends on that. That's why the call to the agent is also important, because you got to know how much time's been on the market. What if the home's been on the market for 90 days and you call the agent and they say they have multiple offers today? Could be true, probably not true. Not saying that agents are misleading. I will say that it has happened to me before. I remember one of my very first listings I ever got. In fact, it was the first listing. 14 on day 14, we got 3 offers the same day. We had no other offers before then. All of a sudden we did. It's like I was on the receiving end. I knew what happened. So I knew that we got 3 offers the same day on day 14. That was in a market where the days on market was probably around 30. So it's still below the average days on market. But that just showed to me that like it can happen that you get multiple offers later on, but it's not as likely. So I would say call the agent, see what information you can find out. I always ask them, do you have any offers on the table? Even though if I'm representing the seller, I don't tell them anything. But if I'm representing a buyer, I do want to know that information. So if you're willing to tell me, I'd love to find out. So I'm going to ask them. And if they say no, I'm not going to be mean and push back on it. But I will say, how many offers do you have on the table? Are they close to list price? Are they anything like that? See what information you can get. The more you can get, the better off you'll be. But I don't know if that kind of helps answer your question, Adrian, but it really just depends on how much attention that home is getting.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I appreciate that.
But, okay. Any other questions or ahas or things that you're wondering about when presenting, I guess? Okay. All right, so essential steps in negotiating. So acknowledge and affirm common ground. That's always, you want to, going back to that win-win mentality. When we are trying to negotiate something, it's always good to start with, this is what we already agree on. To kind of remind the other side that, hey, we are in agreement with this and this and this. So it sounds like we're good on this. We're good on the deadlines. Sounds like your clients are willing to move forward with these deadlines or whatever. That way you build a little bit of a connection, and then ask what and how questions. Know that positioning is a process, and then know when to walk away. The when to walk away part is really based on experience. And like we said, Adrian, for that one, it's just if the home's been on the market for 60 days and they're saying that they're not willing to accept anything below what they're asking for, and you feel like that price is too high compared to the comparables that are out there, that may be something to just walk away with or walk away from. You don't necessarily need your clients to be in that position, but if they're willing to work with you, then that may be a different story. Okay. Last part. These are the negotiating tips, which I think hopefully will be very helpful. Number 1, be professional. As we talked about, people will remember you, and they want to work with somebody that is professional because it helps their credibility as well. If I'm a listing agent and the buyer agent is really asking some crazy things, that does make it harder for me to look professional to my clients. And so it's in my best interest for my own personal business to work with somebody on the other side that's professional. And that goes both ways. So be the professional that you expect them to be as well. Keep your goal in mind. We've already talked about this a few times, but again, it's the most important thing to know what is most important to your clients so that is non-negotiable, but maybe you can be flexible on some other things to show them that you are willing to negotiate, you're willing to try to accommodate, but there are certain things that are non-negotiables. Because if you are non-negotiable on everything, what might happen? Yeah, they'll feel like you're just too hard to work with. You're not willing to even try to accommodate. So that can be frustrating for the other side. So I'm not saying you have to be negotiating on some things, but more often than not, if you have your priorities and they're not met yet, you've got to get your priorities met by being flexible in other ways. Number 3, pay attention to your communication and tone with anyone involved in the transaction. There's a great book out there called Never Split the Difference. Maybe you've heard of it, by Chris Voss. Never Split the Difference. Welcome, by the way. What's your name? Renelle. Oh, you have been. Oh, sweet. Well, welcome. Yeah, Never Split the Difference. It's by Chris Voss. He was the lead FBI negotiator for terrorists. So he would be the one that would talk to them when they have like a hostage situation or something like that. He was the negotiator talking to try to help them, because in his words, he said, a win for us is that nobody dies. Like, that's the stakes he was dealing with. Anything less than that is a loss, right? So, but anyway, he wrote a book about a lot of different tips on how to do it. I'll tell you a couple of things that I remember from it. Number one, when they say something, you can repeat the last two words of what they say to get them to expound on it more. So for example, let's say that you are representing a buyer, you call the seller's agent and they say, yeah, the seller needs to move out by May 31st. On your end, by saying May 31st, what is that basically saying to them? Yeah, why is that date important to you? Help me see more. So it's just a small little trick that he used to help them continue to talk and be the one to give more information than you are. Get them to continue to talk. You can use that in any situation. Does not have to be, I've used that, don't tell her this, but I've used that with my wife a lot, right? But it helps. It helps. I need more information in order for me to really help the situation. And so that helps all the time. So that's just one little trick. Repeat like the last one or two words, depending on what it is, just in the form of a question in order to get them to continue to expound on it. Yeah, and then your tone should just be kind and soft tone. If you're emotionally charged up or aggressive, that comes across in a very unpleasant way from the other side. And so that definitely can harm your negotiating position. Okay, continually refer to your client's motivation when speaking to them. So if you know their motivation, you can repeat that in your conversation with them. So maybe you're going back to our situation, the sellers, maybe they explained that, well, yeah, because on May 31st, that's when they are closing on their new construction home that they need to move in by. So they've got to close by that date or else they can't close on that home. So that date is really important to them. That's good information to know. Later in the conversation, you can say things like, well, yeah, we would love to work with you because it's really, we understand it's important for your sellers to move in by May 31st so that they can close on that house. And the way that we can accomplish that is by making my clients feel more comfortable by lowering the price to this amount, something like that. So kind of bringing up what their motivation was, whatever they told you, you kind of bring that up, not in a manipulative way, but it's like, hey, this is a reminder. You said this was important to you. This is your number one priority. Let's get you to change this second priority just a little bit to accommodate us so that we can fulfill your number one priority a little bit better. 5, we've already talked about this a bunch. Don't reveal too much. Listen more than talk. Keep your client's motivation close to your chest. So this is different. It's kind of tricky because you want to get their motivation on the other side. You want to know what their motivation is without telling them your number one motivation. Why not? What do you think might? Yeah, weakens your negotiating position. Absolutely does. Because then they can kind of use that against you a little bit, right? So yeah, it is kind of tricky, but if you, the more information you can find out about them without giving them information about your clients, the better position you'll be in to help them accomplish their goals as well as you accomplish your client's goals. Because as soon as the seller says, again, I keep going back to this one because it's the most obvious to me. As soon as the seller says we've got to sell this by this date, every buyer that's out there, every buyer's agent is going to drop that price. So you don't necessarily want to give that kind of information out, but that applies to any type of importance for seller, because that is their priority, but I don't want the buyers to know that. And that's what I'll tell my sellers or when we're talking. I could even say that on the buyer's end. Let's use a different scenario. I'm representing a buyer and let's say that they are starting a new job and they don't want to rent and they're moving from out of state and they've got to be in this house by same deadline, May 31st. If I'm working with the seller and our deadlines are a little past that, or they're wanting to go past that, and I tell them they have to move in by this date, they may see that as, okay, we can change that date, but we're going to have you raise the price a little bit. because then my seller's going to go somewhere, have to live somewhere, or rent somewhere for a little while, or whatever the situation may be, but they may use that priority against you and have you sacrifice in other ways. That's why it's important not to share more information than you absolutely need from the other side, while trying to get as much information from them as you can. That's the trick to negotiating. And then lastly, don't be attached to the outcome. Trying to figure out how to apply this here, but just because I like stories. Back in my past life, before I became an agent, I was a door-to-door salesman. We did direct TV subscriptions. If you guys ever, I mean, you probably have had like either cable TV or Dish Network or Direct TV or anything like that. Have you ever had those before? Any of those systems? What happens to the price after 2 years? Every single time goes way up. So as a salesperson, it was really easy because all I would do is find people that had whatever system for more than 2 years, because I guarantee your bill's way higher. We can get you the same channels with new equipment. So it was kind of fun. But the reason I bring that up is because that's one way I learned negotiating in this last one is to not be attached to the outcome. The way that I interpret that is I had a leader that would tell me that what we could do if you are in a position where, let's say you're in year 3 of that service, so your bill is higher, you basically threaten to leave. And you say, I'm thinking about going to another service. I have a flyer in my hand that said they can give me the same channels for this price. So it's way less. So I'm planning to do that. A lot of times what would happen is they say, okay, well, that's totally fine. You can do it. But what the buyer, what you would say on the phone is, but can you schedule me for Friday to be canceled because my new service won't begin until Friday. That way I'm not lapsing in service. So in their system, you're canceling on Friday. Well, what happens is you get a call the next day from somebody from their department that magically found this way to give you an amazing deal to lower the price, right? And that's what I interpret the don't be attached to the outcome, is because sometimes you have to be at peace with not figuring out the solution here right now in this moment on this phone call. Be okay with it not having a solution yet, and give that some time, because oftentimes on their end, they're having those conversations and they come to that realization that, like, you know what? Price doesn't matter as much as this date. So let's go ahead and be flexible. And they come back to you with that solution. That definitely can happen. So it takes patience, and it takes willingness to, maybe not a willingness, but more of just an understanding that that's kind of how it works sometimes with negotiating, is that it doesn't all get resolved in that moment. Because the reality is, you have to remember, who are you negotiating with? If you're representing a buyer, who are you negotiating with? Okay. You are negotiating with the buyer. Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Right? Is because you just trust that if you present it in a way that, like you say, give them some time to sit on it
Mm-hmm.
and not act desperate or anything like that, yeah, then you're taking care of the number one most thing.
Exactly. Yeah, that definitely helps with the buyer. When you're representing a buyer, you are still negotiating with them, and reminding them of what their priorities are, and maybe the home that the counter offer the sellers just sent you does match their priorities, even if it's not getting everything that they wanted and more, but it does have some of those elements. But that's true. Who else are we negotiating with? Ultimately, yeah, ultimately the sellers. Now, we're not having a conversation with the sellers. Who are we having conversations with? We're having the conversation with seller's agent. So it's not very likely that you're going to be able to resolve everything on that one phone call, because they still have to go have a conversation with their clients. And oftentimes what you'll see is that you'll have to be the one to help educate that agent on what to say to their client. Now, you have to be careful with that, because I have had some people tell me what my job is, and you're supposed to do this, and you have to go do this. Don't use that language, because even if you're brand new, you don't want to be told what to do from the other side, right? But you may give suggestions on on something and just say, you know, I wonder if you told your client something like this, what they would say. That way it comes across a little bit less like you've got to go tell them this. It's more of like, you could say this. Yeah, I don't really care, but you could say this, right? It's almost that feeling like the last one, like you do care, but you have to come across that you don't really care about the outcome. If they end up not getting the house, that's okay. There's other houses out there. And that's true. So you should believe that. I've had many times, and you guys have all probably had this if you've gone through it more than once, but where a client found the perfect home, we tried everything we could, we didn't get it under contract, they felt disappointed, and then the next day another home comes up that was even better. Somehow that happens, right? Like there is not only one home that fits your buyer's needs. There's just not. And if it is, it's probably going to have to be a new construction. But what happens as soon as somebody builds a home that they designed and that everything is perfect the day that they move in? They'll find something wrong with it. So there is no such thing as a perfect home, right? And your lifestyle changes, and so that means your home would have to change every day to accommodate your needs. Like that's something that sometimes I'll bring up to my buyers and to help them realize that although you may find the perfect home one day and we'll try to get it, if we can't get that one, just know there's always another one that we'll be able to find. So there's never just one. But anyway, don't be attached to the outcome, and recognize that they're going to have to go have a conversation with their agent. That was one of the things that I didn't appreciate the most from that example that I shared at the beginning with that agent that was mean, was that she was answering everything for the client without having a conversation about it with them. Because the questions that I was asking, I to this day don't remember what exactly I asked, but I remember asking several things like, well, would they be willing to do this? Could they do that? And she was like, no, they're not going to do that. They're going to say no. I already know what they're going to say. You don't. You haven't asked them. Yeah. Yeah, she didn't understand her role. She's representing them. That doesn't mean she answers everything before talking to them, right? That's the same with us. Yeah. Yep, exactly. Yeah, because you never know what's going on in their minds. And they, again, their priorities, whatever those are, a win for them may look different than a win that you think they want, right?
So just as
Uh-huh.
they found a house that was high end, so
Sure. Hmm. Yeah.
by Monday. Like, we didn't get any offers this weekend,
Ah,
so we're gonna off the market.
interesting.
And so you never know.
Yeah.
That's
You don't know what's going on the other side. And we don't know what the other offers look like. Maybe they have 5 offers, but they're all way lower. Maybe they, you just don't know. You're exactly right. That's why my advice to my clients is always go in with the best offer you can go in with that you would feel comfortable with. And that way, if we lose out, that's okay. You gave it your all. You didn't want to pay extra for that anyway, so it's totally fine. We'll find another house. If we get it, yeah, maybe we could have saved 2,000 or 3,000, or maybe, and we still have that chance as we go through the due diligence period. It's not completely lost, and the financing appraisal, but that way you're not, I think it's just a much more comfortable position.
and especially if it's 30-year long. Not most, but
Yeah,
most
oftentimes, yeah, most common.
houses, it's like
Yeah.
a few dollars under.
Ah, yes, I'm glad you brought that up. Right, exactly. But what if they're a cash buyer? Then that extra $5,000 makes a big difference because that's money out of their pocket now. Exactly. Yep, 100%. So that's the thing. So the knowledge, you've heard, knowledge is power, right? Like the more knowledge you have is better for your negotiating position. But you're exactly right. And it's funny that you said that, because I had that conversation last night with the potential cash buyer for my listing and that kind of came up. And we're talking, yeah, like for a buyer that is getting a loan, an extra 20 grand really is not going to make that much of a difference. But for you as a cash buyer, that would make a big difference. That's $20,000 in your bank account that does not have to leave, right? That's a big difference. So yeah, knowing that. Well, so far, has this been helpful? Has this been good to kind of talk about? Becky, for you specifically, is there parts that that you are still wondering about or want to gain more confidence in? Okay, do you know specifically what those are? We're getting close. Yeah, I think we might be done actually. Yes, that's all the presentation had, but I'm happy to have more conversation with you.
Getting repairs.
Ah, okay, perfect.
Got your inspector report and it comes back.
Yes, so glad that you brought it up. Let's go through both. So let's start with the buyers then. I'm glad you brought that up because that is a very important one.
Wait, what was the
So
question?
for those on Zoom, yeah, for those on Zoom, she's wondering about negotiating repairs. So we're going to talk through that a little bit on both the buyer's end and the seller's end. Let's start with the buyer's end. On the buyer's end, well, on both ends, it's good to have preparation, meaning you should talk to your client before this happens and educate them on what could happen, what the outcomes are. So for example, on the buyer's end, I remember this, one of my first home inspections that I had done, the home inspector went in there, found all the problems he could, because that's his job. And then when I went to the walkthrough with him and with my client there, and we're going through the house and he's pointing out all the problems, in my mind, I'm thinking, awesome, those are just simple cosmetic little things, nothing major, great. By the end of that, home inspector leaves and my client's like, should we even get this house? And I was like, wait, what? What do you mean? She's like, oh, there's just so many problems. I'm like, well, there's nothing major. Every house has problems. So for me, it was easy to see that there was nothing major because I've gone through this multiple times. For her, that was her first one. It was her first house. So she's thinking like, what is going on? So that was the first time I realized I need to educate them better. And I need to say, and this is what I tell them. I'll tell them the home inspector's job is to find every problem he possibly can. Every house has a problem, including new construction. I can have a home inspector go into a new construction, and they will find problems. That's their job. They're very good at that. That's good because you want to know what those are, first of all. But really what we're looking for is if there are problems in major areas of the home, such as foundation, the structure of the home, the electricity, the roof, the plumbing. Like those are the 5 main areas that I want to make sure that there are no major issues with that. And if that's not the case, then great. He'll give you this home inspection list as a honey-do list for you to work on over the next couple of years if you would like to, patch up the wall here or fix up the things here. But that way we know what to expect. Yeah, so I'd say plumbing, roof, electrical, foundation, and structure of the home, meaning like the walls and like I said, yeah, the big ticket items. The furnace could be one, right? Because yeah, if it's old enough, the furnace could be costly. Water heaters are a little less expensive, but still could be one to look into. Exactly. Yeah, if you've negotiated a home warranty, you should be okay. But yeah, that's what I would tell them. So that way when we get the report, they're expecting to see a lot of the issues, but what we're really looking for is there anything major? And then I tell them it really what we're also looking for is safety concerns with the home. Right? We don't want you moving into a home that you don't feel safe in, or that you're safe with your kids or pets or whatever you've got. Yeah. Yeah, that could happen. I went into this one home once. We did a home inspection. We were under contract. It was kind of a unique home. My clients wanted something different, wanted something kind of quirky and different. It was like an octagon shape of a home. They built in the 70s. It was in Provo. And they did the home inspection on it. What they also found about that home was that the foundation that was used during that time, that they were kind of doing this experimental foundation with wooden foundation that I'd never heard of before. And so the home inspector found certain parts of the wood that had been warped, certain parts that have been, whatever you call it, decayed when they're kind of off. So he was like, honestly, this is a big issue. How much would it cost to replace a foundation in a home that's already built? Could be close to $100,000. So is that information helpful for my clients? 100%. We walked away. They decided to walk away. And so that's the kind of stuff that I'm having my buyers know, is that that's what we're looking for. We are looking for something major that is affecting the value of your property, so that if you went and turned around and sold it the next day, could you sell it for that same price? Or is there something they're going to find that says, no, that foundation needs to be replaced. I'm not buying that house. That's worth $100,000 less. Like that's what we want you to avoid. Okay, well, I'm almost done with the buyers. So then we go through the inspection, and we will point out some things. And so I'll have a conversation with my clients. By now, we've already talked about how we're not going to be asking for everything, because what I tell my clients is, if we ask for 20 different items to be repaired, what do you think the seller is going to choose to repair? And I just ask my clients that. And usually, from my experience, they'll pick their favorite 2 or 3 easy things that are easy for them to do, to show that they're willing to help out, but they're going to do it in their own way. How would you feel if the 3 things they chose are the 3 things lowest on your priority list? My clients are usually going to say, well, no, I don't want that. So I tell them what I recommend is picking the top, and I don't give a number, but I just say picking your top absolute priorities that are just really, really important to you, that either cause a safety concern or something that you just don't feel comfortable with moving into a home because it has this problem or whatever. What are those items? And let's go talk to the sellers about those. That way, hopefully we can get them to do all of them. But even if they don't accept to do any of them, are you still willing to move forward on this home? And that's the conversation you need to have with your clients before you talk to the seller's agent, because you need to know what your position is. Because if they say, no, we are not willing to move forward with this home unless these things are before we move in, that's the knowledge you have. That's their priority. And so now you've got to problem solve. You've got to figure out, okay, first, let's see if the sellers will just fix it. That's great. Second, if they don't want to do that, let's see if they'll contribute towards closing costs so that we can fix it as soon as we move in. If they don't want to do that, is there any way we can help out? Maybe the agents can work out something on the commission side to make that a little bit easier or something to make sure that that happens. But that way you can still get it to move forward. But you're kind of going through your list of preferably the sellers and kind of going that way. But that's what I've done. And it doesn't happen very often that I have a client that wants to ask for the moon when I do it that way. When you follow that process, most of the time they're going to be pretty reasonable. So that's on the buyer's end. When it comes to the actual repairs, though, just be careful, because sometimes if you're asking the sellers to do certain repairs, they're going to do it in their own way, unless you're very specific, and they're going to do it in the cheapest way, the easiest way, the way that may not look the best. So most of the time, what I prefer, and you got to check with the lender too if they're getting a loan, because sometimes they won't allow them to contribute more towards closing costs. But I would prefer in most cases to have the sellers just contribute the money if we can get an accurate estimate on what it's going to cost, so that my buyers can do it when they move in or have it done in their own way, the way that they would like it to be done. Yes, or I have a list. I have a list of preferred vendors that I can reach out to, that they can either give them a quote, or they may want to go visit the property to get a proper estimate, which is totally fine. That's part of your due diligence. That's why if the due diligence deadline is 2 weeks away, that doesn't mean get your home inspection the day before. You're going to want to get that done as soon as you can, so that you can have additional people go inspect the home, or do, maybe maybe they need a plumber to go through and, have extra things or get estimates. That's part of your due diligence period. So you want to make sure you have enough time for all of that to happen. Yeah, that's kind of on the buyer's end. Anything more on the buyer's end that we need to discuss when you present to the seller? Maybe what's the best way?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Adrian.
So let's say you put in an offer, right? And you negotiated what it turned out to be. Then after the inspection, something else comes up. Do you like renegotiate that through like the offer addendum, or do you just talk to them and hope to see if they do it? Or
yeah, that's a great question. So you've got your initial offer, they've accepted the offer, you're moving forward. You get your home inspection done. Let's say that there are some things that your clients want to ask for that are important to them. The best way to do that, in my opinion, is my process is to first have a phone call conversation with the agent and say, hey, this is what they found. I don't want to say this is the best way. There's 2 ways I've done it before. Both have worked. So do whatever you're most comfortable with. One of the ones is that where you call the agent and you let them know this is what they found. Would your client be willing to help us out in this area, in order to help my client feel more comfortable in moving forward, so that, go back to their priority, your clients can stay on track to move out by May 31st. All right, bring up their motivation, whatever it was that they told you 2 weeks ago. And then after that, get their approval. If they approve, then great. Put it in an addendum saying seller to contribute X amount of dollars towards closing costs. Or you could have them do the repairs, But what's the problem or the potential problem if we put those repairs specifically in an addendum, saying seller to do this to repair downstairs bathroom? Okay, that's true. What if your buyer's getting a loan? Does that matter? Could matter to the lender. They oftentimes don't like to see specific repair requests on an addendum. And so what is pretty customary is in this industry is to have an email sent to the sellers saying, these are the expectations. My buyer would like X, Y, and Z to be completed before the final walkthrough on this date, right? Which would be a few days before settlement. That way they know what they're supposed to do and they need to get those things done, so that if you don't get those things done, you can either extend settlement deadline to allow them more time to do so, or come up with other resolution, whether it's a money towards closing costs or something like that. But the trick about that is that if you put it in an addendum, a lot of times the lenders won't like to see that there. They don't like to. So you've kind of got to figure that out. Not the repair request. There is an addendum called the repair request resolution addendum. You could do it that way, but I would just say check with the lender. Before you do that, just check with the lender and say, hey, if we were to request these repairs in an addendum, would there be an issue? Can you foresee any issues with that? Because sometimes the lender will have to send an additional appraiser or an additional inspector out to the home after those repairs have been complete. So it could cause delays in that way, right? Which is why most often the seller's agent is going to help their clients understand that they need to get those things done, so that they can stay on track, right?
I also always include that it's by a licensed contractor and it's not their
Good.
brother, they don't have their-
Yeah, by a licensed contractor and to send proof of receipt. Yep, because you're right. They could just do it on, they could YouTube it and do it on their own and it's done, but it may not be done to the standard that it needs to be, right? But again, that's why I usually prefer to just ask for concessions if it's okay with my client, because then they can take care of it after. Less paperwork on the lending side, it's less hassle, things get done, as long as the amount that you're asking for is appropriate. That's the only thing, because if you negotiate at $2,000 and then they move in and they're like, what? This costs $2,000 just for this one, and now we have these other items to fix. That can get hard.
Anyway, it was new construction.
Yeah.
And they didn't have their AC and
Hmm.
it wasn't there. And it was January, February in Ogden, and they couldn't pour cement
Oh
to
yeah,
put it on. So they're like, okay, you're gonna close this house without that. It's like, hold on.
yeah.
So we did have to,
You're like
there's another,
an addendum.
yeah, that's. And then the lender, yes, was like, "Hey, have to get that out of the house inspection."
Right.
Anyway, it was a whole thing, and brand new construction. And it's supposed to be there by June 1st.
Hmm.
We'll see if the snow's gone by June 1st.
Seriously, at this point, if the snow's gone.
Then, but
Yeah, it can get a little tricky.
something- Yeah, it's just kind of period.
Right.
They don't need basic right now.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
still a little nervous about it.
Hopefully the builder abides by it.
We'll see.
Keep
But
their
yeah,
reputation up.
so we had to have
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
set aside for that.
I'm glad you brought that up.
That's what-
That is another option.
A new thing.
Is instead of having the seller pay closing costs, they could pay and you talk to the title company to set this up, but basically they can pay directly to a contractor. So that way the sellers, and I have had this done before, they needed a fence to be done. And the seller had agreed to doing it, but instead of the buyer paying for it, what they had, and instead of giving them concessions, because they couldn't give any more concessions, what they had was that the buyer or the seller would pay directly to the contractor that was going to do the fence. And if that amount was too much, then that money is refunded to the seller. In our case, that's how we had it written up. And if it happened not to be enough, then the buyer would cover the difference. But it was enough, and so they ended up giving us like $200 refund to the seller. Oh, really?
In reserve.
There you go.
The builder had.
That's what they required. But yeah, that's another solution that could be very good, to pay a licensed contractor if, for example, it doesn't work out that the contractor can come before you close. Maybe it's something done later like that. I had another one where it was sprinklers, but it was similar. It was in the winter that they bought it, but there was no sprinkler system. They had negotiated they would do it, so they had funds reserved that the title company kept basically until the sprinkler system was installed by the company, and then that's who they paid, and any difference would go to the seller. This is another great way to do it. Keeps it cleaner, and it's not hard to set that up. Just talk to the title company. They may need you to write an addendum or something, but really easy way to do that. So there's really those three options. If you're negotiating as a buyer or even as a seller, the options are, besides not doing them, are to have the sellers repair them before you move out, which is not my favorite. You could have them contribute money towards your closing costs and you just deal with it as a buyer when you move in, or you can have them directly pay to a contractor to have them deal with it after you move in still, but then it's directly to them. So yeah, great questions. Okay, we good on the buyer side then? So we flip to the sellers. I will say that I had a seller once who I was representing. We got under contract. We had multiple offers. I'm gonna tell you two stories. We had multiple offers. They went and did their home inspection, and it was a 3-year-old home. Apparently they wanted the furnace. They said the furnace was no good and they needed it to be completely replaced. So they were asking for $5,000 in concessions. What did we do? What do you think we could have done as a seller? Okay, could have put in a new furnace. It's not the route we went. Could have dropped the price on the house. It's another option. There was, we didn't even look into that. We didn't even have to go that far. It's true. That could have been. What we ended up doing was, remember our negotiating position, where are we at? We're under contract, but what did we have at the beginning? We had 3 offers and they were all very close in price. And so all we had to say was, I'm sorry, we had multiple offers. The sellers don't feel like they're in a position that they need to address that. And they would not, and so they're no. Yeah, we could have gone into the warranty. You're right. Yeah, if it was. But I'm saying that's what we told them. And we said, would you be willing to move forward anyway? And they said, all right. Well, he went back to his client. They talked about it. The next day they came back and said, yeah, we're good. We're going to move forward. So because we had multiple offers, that was our leverage, saying we don't have to do anything right now. I don't know. That doesn't always be the case. Sometimes the sellers may say, yeah, they're right. We've been thinking about doing something like that anyway. Let's just go ahead and do it. And that's out of the kindness of their heart. They can totally have that option. Maybe not in a situation with $5,000 on the line, but maybe if it was a small repair that was requested, they could have easily done that. And I've had a lot of people do that, because most people don't want to leave a home for someone else to move into that it has these issues that they've known about for years and they haven't taken care of. And most people don't want to leave that on them. So if they find that out in the investigation, in the inspection process, and they ask for that, a lot of sellers are going to be willing to do that for them. Yeah, a lot of repairs. Yeah. Yeah, nitpick out of it. Yeah. I agree. It's a nice thing to do, but it's also, in my opinion, the best thing to do to prepare your home, especially in this market, to do those things beforehand, because that's how you can get multiple offers. You can get more attention. You can have a better chance of getting a higher price. You can have stronger negotiating position when it comes to repairs and all of these different things. So many benefits to the seller to have their homes staged and prepped and ready to go before they even list it. So yeah, I guess that's even more work way beforehand to do to help educate your sellers on that, help in the negotiations. A lot of home inspectors now are doing a seller inspection where they'll go in and they'll do it. They don't give an entire report like they normally do, but it's like, I know one inspector does it for $150. He'll go in and do a full-on inspection of the home. The only thing he just doesn't do is that report, but he'll make notes of, here's some things that an inspector is going to find later that I recommend taking care of before you list it. That's a very good value for a seller before you even list it on the market. Yeah. What's that? His name is James Hoffman. He has his own company, Hoffman Home Inspections. Yeah, and I'm sure other inspectors do that, but I think that's a good way for him to stay busy, as well as for him to offer value, and for you as an agent to offer value. You could even offer to pay for that, maybe. I don't know, whatever we want to do. But okay, so let's say that you're a seller's agent. I told you about that experience. We had leverage because we had multiple offers. So again, going back to this, we knew where we stood. We had a strong negotiating position because we had multiple offers, and we knew that that's where we were. So that when they asked for repairs that we didn't feel like we needed to do, it was just a simple, sorry, we got other offers. You can choose to go with it, or we have other options. It's up to you. And they ended up going with it anyway, and everything was fine. That was 3 years ago, in that particular instance. There was another home that I helped sell. We got under contract. We did not receive multiple offers on this one, but the list that they sent us was 25 items. The longest list I've seen. I'm sure there's been others that have been even longer. Longest list I've been a part of. And I'm on the seller's end receiving this email that has all these giant things. And I'm like, what are you crazy? Like, that is so many things. So there's a couple options you can do. What I chose to do was just say, hey, I forwarded it to my sellers, and I gave them a call and said, hey, this is a list. It is longer than I've seen before. You're not obligated to do all of these things. It's whatever is you feel comfortable with, but just understand they were under contract to purchase a home as well on a tight timeline. And so in order to accomplish their dream of getting into that home that was a dream home for them, they, that's kind of where we're at. Because now we're a week and a half into the under contract process. To find another buyer that may not ask for so many things may be a little tricky. And so again, reminding them of what their priorities were and helping them say, you don't have to accept all of these things, but it's, what would you like to do? I was thinking he was going to go through and pick 5. He ended up picking 17 items, which I was surprised by, but he was almost willing. He was more than happy to do it because he knew that that was how he was going to get to his next goal. So it goes back to like what I would think would be a success was to negotiate only 5 items that you have to do. What he was thinking was a success was just doing all that he could to make them happy so that they can move into their next home. So yes. So what I'm saying, the point of sharing that is that, again, you need to give that chance to your sellers to decide. I think a lot of sellers may have looked at that and like, they're crazy. That's how I felt. Okay, well then let's figure out a couple of things that we want to do or figure out negotiating. But he had a different mentality. Yeah, exactly.
Kids have inherited their parents' past
Sure.
or whatever. They're not.
They may not care. Yeah. 100%. Yep. Exactly. So yeah, and that's 100% right. So my job, what I consider our jobs to be in most of what we do, is to provide them the information they need to make whatever decision is right for them. And so in that case, that's what I did. I told them that you could choose to do all of these, you could choose to do none of them, you could choose to do some. I also told him that other options instead of doing repairs is to offer concessions. That's something we could do, or to offer to pay a contractor at closing so that that's taken care of, or to not accept anything. And we go find another buyer. Like, these are your options. These are the risks. What would you like to do?
Do you find that not just consulting
Yeah.
job is consulting, but sometimes
Exactly. 100%. Yep. So I'll make another plug for my spin selling class next week. That's awesome. I don't think, maybe you heard me to mention it on Zoom. Yeah. So that's one of the things we talk about. One of the principles in spin selling is if I say it, they might believe it, but if they say it, they do believe it. Which means in this case, I provide them with the information, ask them what they would like to do, and I ask questions to help guide them to what I think they might want to do, and then have them be the ones to tell me this is what we want. That way they're on board with it. I'm not telling them, okay, you got to go do all these 25 items or else we're not going to be able to move out. That's more threatening, right? I want them to be the ones to decide this is what I'm going to do, because then their heart's in it. And they own up to the fact that is their decision. They don't put that on me as the agent. Again, I'm just providing them the information, providing what their options are, what the risks are, what the benefits are. What would you like to do? And that's how he chose to go about it. And he did it. And he was a handyman. So like for him, it wasn't a big deal. I mean, it definitely took time, and he wasn't thrilled about it. I'm not going to say that he was like, yeah, can't wait to go do these 17 things. but he saw the bigger vision and he was like, yeah, okay, I can do that. That's fine. And it worked out. So we went back to them and I was almost excited to go tell them, hey, we're going to do 17 of these things. I thought we were going to do 2, you know? And they luckily were able to, we did go back and forth a little bit more on a couple more of those, but we were able to work it out to where it worked out for everybody. So yeah, that's what I would advise on the seller's end is knowing their position, but then just giving them the options and helping them make a decision for them and move forward with it that way.
Don't even say something like, for me, if you're told
Yeah.
this,
Right.
Then look at the, even if it goes, might still have a
100%. Yep. Yeah, they don't have to. Yeah, that's why the whole thing about getting them, the spin selling is designed to help to ask questions to get them to think through it and them to verbalize what they want. Because if I tell it to them on what they need to do, it usually will go in one ear and out the other. They don't completely understand, or maybe they'll reluctantly go ahead with it. They don't fully understand the implications of what they're doing, and that's why they have a negative feeling about it. So if we can get them to think through it and really get that. Once in a while, though, they will ask you what would you do? And I think that's a little more appropriate to give them our advice. But we have to wait for them to ask for it. We don't want to just give unsolicited advice, like you said, and just say, they gave us these 25 things. I think you should only do 2 of them. What do you want to do? Well, they're going to feel dumb thinking, well, I was thinking, dude, I could do 15. Like, then they're going to feel dumb saying that. And then that might just ruin the whole situation, right? It may make it a lot tougher. So you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot by just giving unsolicited advice. Have them think through it. And then if they ask you, then okay, then maybe have that conversation with them. But yeah. Cool. Has that been helpful? Yeah. Is there anything else that anybody has questions about or does not feel comfortable with negotiating?
I have another question.
Let's hear it, Adrian.
So when you're putting, what would you do when you put in an offer? Like, would you look at the seller disclosure and ask for it before, or just go for it and look at it after?
It's a good question. I like not to. And the reason for that is because I want to get under contract as soon as possible. And I don't want my buyer to have any reason to not want to get under contract yet, because I feel like we have a stronger negotiating position if we can deal with those things after the fact. And what I mean by that is, let's say that in a world where, let's just pretend like we had the home inspection done before we even went under contract. Once we decide on that price that we're offering, now the seller knows, okay, you've got all the information you need, you know everything about this house, you shouldn't ask for anything else. And so I feel like we kind of lose our potential negotiating power later on. So what I like to do is get under contract and then have the home inspection done and do this and look at the seller's disclosures and go through that. And if there are any items in there that we can say, hey, this is not something we knew about before going under contract, now I do know about it and that changes the value of the home, this is what I'm going to ask for, right? Does that make sense? Instead of knowing that information before you go under contract, I think it's better to just go under contract and then ask for it, because by then you're 7 days into it and the seller's more likely to accept repair requests 7 days into an under contract phase than to accept repair requests the day before they get under contract, because then their home has been off the market for 7 days. That's 7 days that they're closer to that move out and they're more likely to do certain repairs. On my listings, I haven't, but I have given them when they've been asked. So if a buyer's agent is asking for them, I will give them. Although with what I'm saying, and I've never really thought about it on the seller's end, maybe I should. Maybe we should be putting the attached disclosures there so that they can see that before. But it probably just depends, because if there are a lot of issues, maybe I don't want them to. I don't know. It can go either way. True. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But then it also might turn off buyers, and if they're under contract for 7 days, the buyer also may feel like they're closer to making this their home, and even though there's some issues there, they may glance over those. I don't know. You can look at it both ways. I don't have a great answer for that one, but I'll just tell you that I've never done that unless they've asked for them. If they ask for them, then I'll give them to them, but I've never attached them on my. listening.
Just
Yeah.
I love this.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But there's-
Right.
Like very
It's true. Yeah, I guess I could see it going both ways. Because again, once you're under contract, they're more likely to accept certain repairs. But if they know you knew that beforehand, then they're like, well, you already knew, so now we're not going to change the price. Yeah. Yes, you did. I'm glad. This is great. Good question though, Adrian. Did that help? Yeah.
Yeah, that
Probably
makes
made you more
sense. Thank you.
confused. The buyer side is more, it's easier. But okay, anything else that we're missing? Okay. Well, thank you all for attending. Hopefully you got something valuable out of this and it was worth your time. It's fun. Don't be scared of negotiating. That is a very important piece of what we do. And that's why people hire us. One of the main reasons, whether they know it or not. Take the emotion out of it. Stay calm, cool, collected. Don't give any information out that you don't need to, but try to seek as much information from the other side as you can. And that's how you can develop your position as a stronger negotiator, simply by knowing more. Not because you have these ninja tactics that you're able to use on them, but simply because you just have more information. That's who usually wins. So talk less, ask more.
Naturally, I like to ask questions.
Good. That'll help you.
Like the
Thank you
last
for coming.
meeting, that's fine. That's what we did.
Yeah.
Ask questions,
Mhm. And my theory on questions is it's okay to assume, like, for example, for a seller, of course, they're going to want the highest price possible. That doesn't mean that is their highest priority though, but it's okay for me to ask questions kind of in a assuming way that is their priority. So in other words, I can think to myself, okay, the price is probably the most important to these people, but instead of telling them that, I'm going to ask them a question about that. How important is price to you? That way they tell me that is the number one. That's absolutely okay. Great. How important are these deadlines? In what ways does that affect you if these deadlines are not met? And kind of help them think through those priorities. So assumption is okay only to the extent that you're asking a question about it and not actually assuming that this is what they want and keeping that as truth. Because until they tell you, then you don't know.
like the last deal, I was that the person wanted to sell the home, go get a new one.
Mhm.
And when we got there, the person, they told us, oh, we don't want to sell the house. But after they're talking to the question on what their options were,
Yeah.
they're like, well, when we said that we don't want to sell the home, we don't have to, but we can sell this house and get something that we like to sell it.
Yeah, there you go.
So, by asking questions, sometimes you realize you can change the whole mind.
Yeah, 100%. That's a great point. Asking questions. Yep. And that's our job. Ask more questions. This applies to more than just negotiating. Okay. Well, I'm always here as a resource if you guys ever want to run things past me or have questions. I'm not the know-it-all that knows everything. I have some experience, but just as Becky has shown too, we all have different experience. I can't tell you, every transaction I've gone through in my career has been different, every single one of them, which means the ones that you've gone through already, or the ones that you guys have all gone through, even if it's only one or two, are different than the ones I've gone through. So you've learned things along the way. And so we're all here to help each other and get through this so that we can have a win-win. And hopefully we get to do a deal together that we can all not give each other any information and make it a win-win for everybody, right? Okay, well, thanks for coming. Thank you guys on Zoom.
Hey, thanks, Jordan.